Hi everyone, I'm Michael Baltimore. Welcome to GotTherapy. Dr. Dan Rose from the Counseling Center here at Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia. We want to welcome you to our show today. We talk about mental health issues, psychology, and sometimes other topics like music, for example. And I think we're going to go off and talk a little bit about how music affects us today. So glad you joined us, and we're going to have a conversation, and hope you will enjoy your time with us today. So,
well, but before we talk, we should get out of the way that my injury, because I'm.
Yes, let's talk about it. Because people will see that on your.
Because our regular viewers.
Yes, both of them. I know where you're going. Go ahead.
Both of them. Actually, I think one of them at least has now been released from prison.
Yes,
so
he's out on parole. Yes,
it's not the parole.
Yes.
But I got this. This is a. You will notice that I am injured. I have a problem. I am.
Yes.
I am in. What would you would say? I am. I'm hobbled.
You're hobbled.
How about that? I'm hobbled.
Well, that's your pointing finger too. So when
That's
you're
that-
pointing
that's-
at
yeah.
the truth around
That's
here,
the truth,
so
yeah,
we're
it's,
at the truth.
But
Just
not to worry. This is just as I was telling you earlier. It's a bar fight.
I don't believe that for
And,
1 second. But
let's put it this way: nobody is allowed to say those things about my mom. Just not allowed to say those things.
I don't know. Well, good luck
Even
with
if
that.
they're true.
I hope that stabilization piece you have there, I hope it works for you and you get to feeling better on the finger and the other things that you need on that hand. So we're going to talk a little bit about music. Now, you did an interesting thing today, and those of us who know you fairly well around here know that you're a music aficionado. And that you know
that and macaroni art. I am a.
But that you know a lot of bands that we typically don't know about. Some of us.
By the way, macaroni art, great name, good band. That's a wonderful band.
That's another name.
Good
now
band.
you got a note. You got a note.
I got a notebook. I gave a list of my favorite bands, and
all right, would you take time to just kind of go down that list for our viewers, or
you
is that too long of a
you want me to?
I'd like for them to know some of the.
You'd
names.
like to get? Okay, you want me to go through this
list?
list?
If you're listening, ladies and gentlemen, just raise your hand if you know that.
Okay, I will quickly go through this. I did it once before. Let's see if I can do it again.
Yeah, come on.
And see if I can.
You
Here
don't
it
have
is.
to do it at that speed, but yes.
Here we go. Favorite bands. I gave a list. It's a long list, so prepare. These are some of my favorite bands.
Favorite bands.
They're not in an order, so just in order being remembering it. Okay, we have Para Ubu, Wire, Venetian Snares, The Kinks, Velvet Underground, Unwound, Naked Ray Gun, The Pixies, Get Head, He Said, Knock Mystium, The Who, Acid Mother's Temple, Autechre, Mono Lake, Aphex Twin, King Crimson, Gojira, Blue Oyster Cult, The Jesus and Mary Chain,
and
Bell
what's
and
your
Sebastian.
second band? Okay, that was all one. Oh, no, okay, go ahead.
Blut Aus Nord, The Soft Boys, Robin Hitchcock, Bauhaus, 11 Rockets, The National, R.E.M., Mission of Burma, Godspeed You Black Emperor, Neutral Milk Hotel, Roxy Music, Brian Eno, Public Image Limited, Animal Collective, Ambitious Lovers, Belter Space, good band, Bob Mould, Husker Du, Nova Mob, Boards of Canada, Shellac, Fugazi, Catherine Wheel, Dead Kennedys, Echo and the Bunnymen, 11th Dream Day, Can, LCD Sound System, Amon Duel, Hawkwind, New, Captain Beefheart, Altar of Plagues, they broke up, Wolves in the Throne Room, Bad Religion, Volcano Suns, Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry, Psychedelic Furs, Gang of Four, Lou Reed, XTC, The Cure, Joy Division, Lungfish, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Bob Dylan, Godflesh, The Birthday Party, Sisters of Mercy, The Replacements, Built to Spill, Panda Bears, Sunbather, got a new album coming out, Krallis, Liturgy, Swerve Driver, My Bloody Valentine, Soft Machine, Magma, The Smiths, Morrissey, The Fall, Stereolab, Sleater Kinney, Susan the Banshees, PJ Harvey, Tom Waits, Leonard Cohen, Iron Maiden Ministry, Front 242, Elvis Costello, Chagall Guevara, Daniel Amos, The Call, Guadalcanal Diary, local band from outside of from Kennesaw, I believe.
Yeah.
Guadalcanal Diary, The Connells, Donkey, they were also from Atlanta, Donkey, Shriekback, The Clean, The Bats, The Verlaines, Amon Amarth, Meshuggah, Pansonic, Tim Hecker, Stars of the Lid, Winged Victory for the Sullen, The Flaming Lips, Radiohead, Pulp, Smokin' Dave and the Primo Dopes, local Knoxville band, Merzbow, Daniel Minche, The Chills, The Moody Blues, Jethro Tull, Let's Active, Mouse on Mars, Chemical Brothers, The Swans, Asherah Temple, The Handsome Family, Girls Against Boys, Guided by Voices, Sonic Youth, DOS Races, Public Enemy, Alice Cooper, Superchunk, Magna Pop, X, The Mekons, X, The Rainmakers, Hoodoo Gurus, Adam and the Ants, Frontline Assembly, Gary Newman, David Boy, Iggy Pop, and The Stooges.
Wow, that's an exhaustive list, but that's probably not all.
No, I'm still working on it.
This is the ones that you have on.
Still working on that list.
Still working on it. Wow, there's a lot of bands to keep up with. Now, do you have music from all of those bands?
Yes, I do.
'Cause you've got a real
In fact, I
collection.
probably have the complete discography for every single one of those bands.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. I am very, very impressed, and I hope you are too, ladies and gentlemen, watching this show. Now, let's get to the heart of the matter. That's a lot of bands, and it's a very wide berth there. Very, very extensive range you might have.
Yeah, you got your
Because some of those
shoegaze,
bands,
you
yes.
got your hardcore, you got your punk, you got your American hardcore, you've got your indie, you've got your mumblecore.
We're always talking about the difference between indies and hipsters around.
Okay,
We
well,
haven't
yeah,
figured
that's
that out
it's,
yet, but
that your knowledge
but you
of
got a range.
your knowledge of cuddlecore would probably hipsters probably don't really know their cuddlecore, and those were.
What language are we speaking right now?
These are
Because
all
I'm not
musical
sure if I know.
subgenres.
Okay.
For instance, each of these bands, in some ways,
Makes sense.
they, for instance, your Perubu is not in the same genre as your Mono Lake.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
You don't want to get your Perubu and your Mono Lake confused.
Definitely
Just
not.
don't wanna-
They go at each other a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah, we don't want to be in the middle of that.
Or your Blut aus Nord.
I never heard of that.
Yeah, you don't want to.
No. Amon Amarth, I think I've.
That's right.
That's a
That's
Viking,
the Viking death metal.
Viking
Love those
death
guys.
metal.
Norwegian
Norwegian.
Viking death metal.
Exactly. We want to be in the right category.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm impressed. I'm very impressed.
Well,
with
and
that
the
list.
point of
I
this
have
is
to
just,
say. All right.
in making this, I thought about the idea of how music, in some ways, shapes our identity. And there's some recent research to show that, for instance, that our capacity to appreciate and enjoy and invest in music, and in fact, you even said this earlier, you said
Yes.
they don't make music like they used to.
Oh, well.
And that is a
I'm out of
battle
date.
cry for every generation.
It's always that way. Every,
check.
what, 10, 15 years?
There's
it
always,
starts
they
over?
don't make music like they used to.
They don't.
And
Well,
part of
I'll
what
hold
may,
to
and
that,
there
by
may
the
be
way.
truth to that. There
Yes.
certainly may be a truth.
Yes.
But
At
there-
least for me, maybe in my development.
There could be. So for
All
you,
right,
the-
we're
you know,
talking
the
about
you got your Benny Goodman, and your
All right, let's not
the,
go back that far, basically.
but yeah, your chubby
yeah,
checkers.
your chubbies and your checkers. All right,
But,
so yeah, no, but I mean, people do kind of say this is the era, this is
And
the,
in
my
some ways,
music from the past.
that
and connect
speaks
with
to
it,
the
yes.
role of music in our identity, and that there is a point at which our identity is at its most plastic. Adolescence to late adolescence, I think that's when we typically find a music that we love, a band that we like. We have
Yes.
posters on our dorm walls, right?
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. We identify.
Benny
in that
Goodman
way,
on
yeah.
the wall.
No.
That guy, yeah.
Spencer Davis, Steve Winwood. I'll give
Okay,
you
they
some
go.
names. All right, there you go.
Spencer Davis, Steve Wood. So we're square in the '60s. That's where we're at, right?
Yes. As a
This
matter of
is
fact.
and this would be.
And the old joke is, I don't remember the '60s, but that's.
Well, if
I'll
you
get that
remember
out
them,
of
you
the
weren't
way.
there. Is the old
That's right.
saying.
That's right.
That's the. So we would say that these bands, and how would you, when you say Steve Winwood or Spencer Davis,
Yeah.
these would be what, progressive blues? What we call
A
this?
little bit of that, yeah. Progressive, it would be the beginning of progressive rock, basic rock back in those days, yeah.
So,
in
yeah,
the
that would be
60s,
the,
moving into the late '60s, '70s.
So what would you say? What is it about?
But that's not all. I mean, I'm with you. I've got my list too. When one day I'll make my list. and
but
bring
you
it.
you began so
You
the,
left out John Cage, by the way.
John
which I'm
Cage.
very
Well, see, now
surprised.
I don't have classical or modern composition stuff on here. I didn't,
Okay.
because I was trying to get it in the rock. But there are. You're right, John Cage. In fact, we could do a John Cage piece right now. 1, 2, 3. There he goes. That was
Wow,
that.
I'm
That was
glad
very.
we got
that was
through that passage. That was very
that was
good. Those of you
very,
who
very
look
short
it
John
up
Cage
and,
piece.
find that music out there.
But
it's out there.
what do you think? So, what about this music, the Steve Winwood, the Spencer Davis? What do you think? What about those things you dig, man?
I think I know where you're going a little bit. On
What's this, yeah?
But yeah, this was adolescent time. Those,
Uh-huh.
those years, and you identify with that. They bring back memories, associated memories during that time. So there's more than just the music and the sound itself. There's the memories and the experience from back in those days. So yes, and I do have those out.
And the drug busts.
Yeah, and the drug bust when the police bursted the door. But
When your mom threw out your bong collection.
and took the black light posters off
Yeah,
the
that's
wall.
it, that was- yeah.
You had to have a light to go with a poster back then. I
But it's
don't know what that
fascinating
was
because
about,
you
but yeah.
see,
It's so easy to get off topic here today.
but I
we can
came
do
of age at the beginning of the punk movement.
it. Okay. That
And in
explains a
some
lot.
ways,
to
It was a
lot of us.
direct response to the 60s because in the punk scene, like for instance, John Lydon, who was known as Johnny Rotten, got his first gig. He actually got his gig in the Sex Pistols because he came into the shop that Malcolm McLaren owned. Malcolm McLaren. Yeah. With a T-shirt. It was a Pink Floyd T-shirt, and he'd put it in red marker, "I hate," and it was Pink Floyd.
Right.
And as a result of that, they said, "This guy we like," and his.
Time for us to change over the culture. We need a new marketing strategy.
His reason for hating Pink Floyd
right.
is because the music, A, had become in some way bloated. It became something that could no longer be played. It'd only be played by musicians with a capital M.
Right.
But also because the punk guys thought that they had been abandoned or betrayed by that music, because it moved into a space where it promised some sort of rebellion, promised some sort of change, but instead it became in some ways part of the problem. It became the soundtrack for, as we moved into the 80s, it became the soundtrack for capitalist overreach.
Right. So you mentioned The Who on your list. I mean, that was a band was always talking about revolution.
Well, yeah, in fact, there's a famous line by The Who. It says, what is it? The partying on the left is now partying on the right. And it says,
Old Boss.
Yeah, the old boss.
Same as the
new boss, same as the old boss.
Right.
And the old idea that there is, but the Who, I think, in some ways were proto-punk. In fact, John Lydon wouldn't have had a "I Hate the Who" T-shirt on.
Right.
Because in fact they did a cover of "Substitute" by the Who. And so the Who, in some ways, were reflected sort of, and the Who were a much more primitive band. I mean, they were in some ways non-musicians. The one real musician in the band was the bass player, the Ox.
Entwistle.
Yeah, Entwistle. Mm-hmm. Who, by the way, is a wonderful bass player and dead.
Yes, it happens.
Died of a cocaine overdose, I believe.
You said that this somehow connects with our identity, our development. That this is a cultural piece that becomes part of our development. Explain that a little bit more for us.
Well, think about it's important to note that our notion of a self isn't something that actually exists with a capital E. It's something that's constructed, and it has to be continually contextualized. So the self doesn't really exist. It is something that we build and has to be continually maintained. And so when you're in a place in adolescence, you're in the process of defining who you are and contextualizing that self. And music, particularly at certain points, and it may be the same for this generation, but certainly for most generations, music is sort of a place, a central place to be able to have reflected back to you certain images that you might be able to build into what your self should be. It becomes a rallying cry for certain ways to think and behave. I know when I was an undergraduate, a big band that was coming up out of the underground at the time was REM. Right. And I remember there was an REM album that came out. I think it was Document. It had just come out, and I remember walking to the record store to buy it. And as I was walking home, it was being played in every single apartment in the student ghetto in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I could hear it being played at all these different windows. And I was aware that I was this wasn't just an album, something to be listened to. It was also something that was supposed to give us some sort of blueprint and a map as to how we were supposed to be and see the world.
Ah,
and
interesting.
That's one of the roles of culture, right?
Right.
So it's
music in particular, when that's a roadmap.
Right. And so you think about like Steve Winwood and the Spencer Davis guys. Am I wrong? They were a music, but they were also a movement. They were also a look. They were also, in a way, a map.
And those clothes back then. We don't want to imitate that anymore, and particularly 70s, as I recall too.
But yeah. And even if the clothes change, it becomes literally embedded. Like the minute you hear a song from one of those nodal developmental points, it brings back with it a flood of other things, right?
Sure
I mean,
does.
it doesn't, and like, that's one of the both good things and bad things. Music really can't affect you in the way that it did when you were an adolescent. Like, I can literally remember just being completely floored. I mean, taking a song and playing it over and over again for hours. I mean, literally taking an album and put it in. And I had CDs at the time. I came of musical awareness at a time when CDs were ascendant. So, putting a CD and literally listening to it over, laying in your bedroom floor and listening over and over and over again. And there's a way in which, from a psychoanalytic perspective, that art allows us to be able to express something. It allows us, it's an aesthetic object, articulates an unthought known. So I can remember laying in my bedroom listening to the Jesus and Mary Chain, and their first album is called Psycho Candy. And the Jesus and Mary Chain have this way of they take these sort of almost simple Beach Boy-like melodies and they bury them in feedback and noise. Mm-hmm. So the drums are sort of rudimentary, and there's this sort of the guy's singing voice is almost a melodic moan, and it's buried under this wall of shh. And I remember I couldn't articulate at the time, but in some ways that reflects the very angst of adolescence, doesn't it?
Right.
I mean, there's a way in which
Can you get there from here?
And to hear that sort of song, and in the way they looked, like for instance, they were all sort of slightly unkempt, but they were sort of nerdy. They were in a way hyper literate. They were they dressed all in black, and they always looked down. They had this sort of they represented an image of masculinity that certainly wasn't being reflected back to me in in the South, like what a adolescent boy and male was supposed to be. Like I remember watching. You talk about the way the culture reflects things back. I remember being really sort of angered by Star Wars in a way, because the picture of Luke Skywalker is this guy who likes to drive his car and shoot swamp rats, what he calls them, and he's sort of aw shucks, sort of whatever. In some ways, that didn't, or the masculine guy who plays football and and chases girls and this sort of stuff. But the Jesus and Mary Chain provided a different sort of reflection of someone who was highly sensitive, who was struggling to make sense of the world and themselves, and was knee-deep in books and things like that. And so it sort of became a key moment for my identity formation.
It's very interesting.
I went on a long time with that, didn't I?
Yeah,
that was long.
That was good. We learned a little bit more about you today. But so is it true that then if I know the person's music or that nodal point of those albums, those groups, now I know more about that person?
Well, there's a wonderful book by Christopher Bolus. Anybody has a chance to check it out. It's called Being a Character, and he talks about how walking into someone's office or the room that they typically inhabit, that they have put lots of things in the room that articulate their self, that contextualize their self, that maintain an identity. And he says you can walk into someone's office, and if you have the right eye or ear, you can begin to, almost like on TV shows, the forensic TV shows, you can profile and build. You can it's sort of like you can generate the outline of who they are by the things that they surround themselves with. And so I do believe that your choice of music says something about at least something you're attempting to articulate, but also something that you know but you don't know. It's an unthought known. It's something that you know in your skin, but you couldn't put into words. Like if you ask me, like why, and if you ask someone, like why do you like that song? Right. Or why is that your favorite movie? There's often a struggle to articulate that because it is an unthought something. It hasn't been put into words yet. Maybe never can be articulated, but it is known. It's a lived known.
And it connects with that person at some deeper level, maybe something that they can't articulate.
Like my love of Porky's 2 really says, maybe that's not really my favorite.
That may not
but
but also there's certain, I mean, going back to your list, and a lot of it was in the rock genre. You said that, but there's such a range in that. So what does that tell me about you? I mean, you've got some very punk rock.
Well, I think that
from Viking metal to the black metal to kind of popular.
Well, some of these bands are relatively new. Many of these, I think that it would speak to like I think I am very much invested in trying to keep open that window of that adolescent experience of music or all culture. So there's a way in which I think that I'm often pursuing that same sort of adolescent fix and experience, and that I'm active in trying to seek these sorts of things to help articulate me.
Okay. Very cool.
Though we'll see that there's a, if you go down the list of things that many of these bands hit from like the 70s to some of them the 60s, the Kinks, for instance.
Sure.
But they hit from the 60s, 70s to 90s. They some of them in the aughts. But it says, even though I may try, I'm still in some ways only enamored with the things that I've known since youth.
All right, that's really interesting. Now, what about the new band that comes out? Do we and we're exposed to it for the first time? Is it dependent on our developmental age? I mean, where are we in this? Can I take on the new band that just started this week and kind of put that on my list as my favorite?
I don't know if you know Gene Simmons, who was a member of the band Kiss.
Yes.
He hates rap music.
Yes.
Doesn't like it. Hates it. And I think that he's been accused of being a racist, all that sort. But I think if you actually listen to what his concern is that he didn't grow up. This is a sound that he doesn't understand, and in some way he's not supposed to,
right,
because it doesn't articulate. I mean, he grew up in the 60s, so to him, the sounds that he listens for that articulate his experience are very different than this. So I think that there is a way in which, and I'll often hear a new song, or we sort of joke in here about like 2 Chainz or something, and there is often a moment when I hear a new sound that I get that "you kids get off my lawn" moment, right?
Oh, yes,
and I'm like, then I catch myself and I say, wait a minute, this is exactly what this music is supposed to do. I'm supposed to be alienated. I'm supposed to feel outside this experience in a way. But what I think often happens is if you allow yourself that moment of "you kids get off this lawn," and then take a breath, then you can be able to lean into it, and then it begin to say something else to you. And you can begin to, there's a wonderful, maybe apocryphal story of Jimi Hendrix is in some bar and listening to some band, and it's like some sort of bar band, and he's intently listening, and the guy turns to Hendrix and says, look, why are you listening to these guys? These guys, he said, no, there isn't a type of music that you can't listen to and hear something that you haven't heard before. And I think that says something about the sort of ear you should sort of be able to try to cultivate.
That ear a little bit, yeah.
So if you can, a new band or a new sound will give you that "you kids get off my lawn" moment, but then it gives you the opportunity to be able to maybe hear something you haven't heard, and that's not easy. Like a band that was just playing at the Tabernacle in Atlanta. It's a band called War on Drugs, and in a way they really aren't a new band because they sort of pull from 70s rock. They have sort of an alt country feel, but they also pull from what's known as krautrock, which is sort of German progressive rock from the 60s and early 70s, and they sort of swirl us around. But when I listen to them, my first response is, but there is something to be said for allowing yourself to stay in that experience for a moment, and then you begin to hear something new, and I think there is something new. I don't know that answers your question, but I think it's something that requires an active investment.
Yes, you have to invest in it and kind of go with it.
Most folks, what they expect from culture is not an active investment. They expect something that eases, something that assuages, or something that diverts. It really requires you to have a different sort of approach to culture. Approach that I might say that's sort of aesthetic. The same sort of approach that a therapist has when he approaches the person that's speaking to them. It's a way of sort of allowing yourself to be invested and moved by what's in front of you. So.
Right. And kind of be open to that experience. All right, that's very helpful. We need to come back and talk about music more. And it does seem, by the way.
That's because I unfortunately become horribly serious and and almost pretentious on that sort of subject. So as opposed to.
We appreciate those moments when we get there, but.
I was gonna I don't know.
Talk more about music. But there are people who will not, who are the "kids get off my lawn" and this is my only music. This is. And will not accept anything else. So you're going to run into those times as well.
Don't get on their lawns.
One of my biggest button issues is the MP3.
what it does to sound.
Of music and the dynamic range of music. And we're going to get on here, and I'll be.
But you know,
guy get off
there's a way in which some new musics find a way to be able to make use of that limitation. So they literally compose and they generate a sort of sonic palette that is within that. And I think you'll see that with some of the contemporary, some of the rap music. There's a way in which some of the sounds are sort of making use of this format. And one of the things I like about punk is to be a punk musician is to not be able to play your instrument. So within the limitations.
That suddenly makes sense to me. Go ahead.
But it literally is. Punk music is in its very form, it's primitive. And your capacity to be able to make use of your limitations, all folk idioms in a way, and that includes jazz, whatever. In fact, one of the reasons why there aren't a lot of great jazz musicians right now is because they're all can play very well. There are no limitations for which they can sort of develop their own personal idiom. You have to have your own personal idiom. If you can't, there's a famous saying with the Ramones. The reason why they started writing songs is because they had to write something they could play. And I think that's a great example of, you know,
makes your point.
Yeah, they had to be able to write something they could play because they couldn't play anything else.
Oh, man. Well, we're all coming over to your house, and we want to hear songs from each one of those on that long list. By the way, that's about 4 pages of single-spaced
it is.
favorite bands.
It's a lot of bands.
There's a lot of bands.
And it's not done.
The tip of the iceberg.
It's not
I'm
done.
pretty sure, ladies and gentlemen.
Done.
You've been watching GotTherapy right here at Columbus State University. I'm Michael Baltimore for Dr. Dan Rose. We're glad you tuned in. Tuning in each week for GotTherapy. We'll see you next time.